It was Halloween night, and the wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows of my empty house. My sister wasn't home. She'd gone to her boyfriend's house 20 miles away. The kind of night that felt empty but eerie, and with the lights of pumpkins flickering through the cracks in the window, it was easy to let the creeping chill get to you. I was alone. The house was quiet, save for the faint sounds of the wind and the occasional rustle of dead leaves skittering against the walls. I was supposed to be watching a scary movie, but something about the emptiness, the darkness, and the unsettling howls of Halloween made it difficult to concentrate. The open layout of the house made it worse. My couch sat in the center of the room, the only thing separating me from the vast, dark spaces behind me. As the film unfolded, I felt my nerves get the better of me, the shadows growing longer, the corners more haunted. I kept glancing over my shoulder, heart racing with each flicker of the shadows that seemed to shift on their own. I wasn't scared, not really, but the feeling lingered, like someone was there just out of sight. The stillness made the air thick, like something was watching, waiting. I turned off the TV, brushed my teeth, and slowly walked upstairs to bed. The house was dark, everything locked up tight. Or so I thought. The silence in my room was punctuated by the faintest sound, soft, indistinct murmuring. My mind, still fuzzy from the sudden shift in atmosphere, struggled to understand what it was. It wasn't the wind. It was coming from downstairs, and it sounded like my sister. I rubbed my eyes, disoriented. The voice echoed, faint but clear, calling my name. Luke. The voice, definitely hers, rang through the dark house, distorted with the usual excitement she had when calling for me. I pushed myself out of bed, groggy and half-dazed, stepping into the dim hallway. The house felt different now. It wasn't the same cozy place I knew. It felt wrong, like there was something here that didn't belong. "What is it?" I called back, half irritated, half confused as I crept toward the stairs. The house seemed colder now, its shadows deeper, thicker. I reached the landing at the top of the stairs and called again. "What's going on?" I turned on the hallway light and walked toward the stairs leading down to the living room. The house groaned under my feet as though it, too, was alive, shifting with every step I took. But when I reached the living room, there was no sign of my sister. The lights flickered for a moment, their dim glow casting long shadows across the furniture. The house felt like it was holding its breath. I looked around. Nothing. No one was there. I hesitated, staring at the empty room, my heart pounding in my chest. I called her name again, louder this time. Still no answer. But then, from the direction of her bedroom, I heard something fall to the floor with a dull thud. The sound was unsettling, unnatural. With my heart thumping in my ears, I rushed down the stairs, skipping the last few. I flicked on the light in the kitchen, which illuminated the hallway and her apartment-like space. But there was no one. The faint, still voice I had heard earlier had vanished. The sound that had fallen in her room earlier. Had it been the wind? I checked her bedroom again. Nothing had moved, not a thing out of place. I called her name one more time, but there was no response. The house, so big and imposing, felt smaller now, as if closing in on me. The cold from the wind outside crept in through the cracks, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. I walked back upstairs, disoriented and panicked. My phone was in my room, but even as I tried to dial her number, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I felt myself freeze, standing there in the dim hallway, my chest tight as the shadows seemed to stretch. Was I imagining things? Maybe I was just tired. The sleep I'd gotten before seemed like a distant memory, but then how vivid and real it had felt. I climbed back into my bed, feeling foolish. Maybe it was just a bad dream, or my mind playing tricks on me. The house was old, after all, Old houses had their quirks, but I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with questions, and soon I had convinced myself it was nothing, just a trick of the wind. In the morning, I woke up to a text from my sister. She asked why I had called her at 1 a.m. I texted back, asking if she'd been home. She replied that she hadn't. She'd stayed the night at her boyfriend's house. I went downstairs to check her room again, my breath shallow. I was desperate to find something, anything, that could explain the events of the night before. There was nothing. No sign of anything falling, no strange marks on the floor, nothing but the quiet hum of the house. The only thing that remained was the memory of her voice, the faint echo in the dark, a sound that was still too vivid to forget. A sound I wished I could explain away, but I couldn't. Halloween in our neighborhood was always loud, chaotic, a rolling tide of children in costumes darting from porch to porch, their giggles and shrieks mingling with the dry hiss of autumn leaves. But that year felt different. The air was heavier, the sky too dark for the early evening. Even the jack-o'-lanterns on our deck flickered with an unsteady light, as if their candles feared what lurked beyond the glass. I was sitting in the living room, a bowl of leftover candy balanced on my knees, scrolling aimlessly through my phone. My wife was upstairs, putting our youngest to bed. Outside, the wind pressed its cool fingers against the windows, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and wood smoke from distant bonfires. At first, I thought the movement at the edge of the deck was a trick of the candlelight. The glass doors reflected my own shape back at me, a dim, ghostly double. And for a heartbeat, I almost convinced myself nothing was there. Then the reflection moved without me. I froze. A man was standing on the deck just beyond the sliding glass doors. He wasn't a trick-or-treater. His outline was wrong. Tall, slightly hunched, his shoulders sharp under a long, dark coat. His hands hung at his sides like dead weight. His face was in shadow, but the orange glow of the jack-o'-lanterns caught the whites of his eyes. They were open too wide. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering against my temples. "Can I help you?" I called out, trying to keep my voice even. No answer. The man didn't move. I stood slowly, every muscle screaming at me not to draw attention. The candy bowl slipped from my lap and crashed onto the carpet, scattering miniature chocolate bars like tiny bricks of gold. The sound broke the stillness, but the man still didn't move. The only thing between us was a thin pane of glass. I could see his breath fogging faintly against the cold air outside. He tilted his head, a slow, unnatural tilt, like a puppet learning how to mimic human gestures. The motion made my stomach clench. I reached for my phone to call the police. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. The screen blurred as I typed. Outside, the man took one slow step closer to the glass. My wife's footsteps creaked on the upstairs landing. "Honey," she called. "Did you hear?" "Stay upstairs," I shouted, my voice breaking. "Lock the door." She stopped mid-sentence, then I heard the slam of our bedroom door. I turned back toward the glass. The man was gone. My heart stuttered. The deck was empty. The jack-o'-lanterns flickering calmly as if nothing had happened. Only my reflection stared back. I edged closer, peering into the night. The backyard was a smear of shadows and bare trees. Our neighbors' Halloween lights blinked faintly like dying stars. Nothing moved. Then a sound, faint, deliberate, from the side of the house. Gravel crunching under slow, careful feet. I backed away from the glass, my hand still gripping my useless phone. The candy wrappers on the floor whispered under my socks. My mouth tasted like metal. Another step outside, closer. I grabbed the nearest thing, a fireplace poker, and clutched it with white knuckles. The house seemed to shrink, walls closing in, shadows thickening. The sliding door rattled softly, just a tremor but enough to make me jump. He was there again, pressed almost against the glass. The porch light above him sputtered, dimmed, and died. This time I saw his face. Pale, too pale, the kind of pale you only see on the underbelly of something that's lived too long underground. His lips were cracked, his teeth small and colorless, but it was his eyes that rooted me in place. No irises, only wide, milky pupils, reflecting the faint pumpkin light. He raised one hand and tapped a single, slow finger against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was so soft, but it might as well have been a gunshot. I wanted to run. My legs wouldn't move. "Why are you here?" I whispered. His cracked lips parted. For the first time he spoke, but it wasn't a voice. It was a rasp, like leaves dragged over asphalt. "You left the light on." I blinked. The porch light? It had just gone out. "What do you want?" His head tilted again, further this time, like a broken hinge. "Invite me." I stumbled backward, clutching the poker. "No," I said. "Get out of here." The man smiled. A thin stretch of lips over those small teeth. His other hand slid slowly down the glass, leaving a faint smear of something dark, like wet ash. From upstairs, my wife screamed. I spun, the poker slipping from my grip. "Stay there," I shouted. I turned back to the deck. Empty again. Only my reflection. Then the glass fogged from the outside, as though someone had leaned close and exhaled. In the mist, a word appeared, scrawled by an unseen finger. "Tonight." The fog evaporated. The deck was empty. I bolted the sliding door, closed every lock, drew every curtain. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. My wife was crying upstairs. I ran to her, checking every room as I went, but the house was still and silent. We didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old wood felt like a footstep, every gust of wind like a whisper. In the morning, I went outside. The deck boards were wet with dew, and the jack-o'-lanterns had gone cold. But on the glass, faint but unmistakable, were 3 long smudges, as if someone with ash-black fingers had dragged them down the door. We left the house 2 days later. We've never spent another Halloween there since. It was Halloween night, and the air outside was thick with fog, wrapping itself around the corners of the house like an ancient spirit that didn't want to let go. Our street had transformed, vibrant with the laughter of trick-or-treaters, the orange glow of pumpkins spilling onto the sidewalk. But in our home, the night was quiet. Too quiet. My parents had been out for hours, attending some Halloween gathering at a friend's house, leaving me alone with the night. It was the kind of night you'd imagine stories would be made of, full of mystery and the promise of something more, but not the good kind of more. I'd been watching a movie in my room, the glow of the TV casting long, unnatural shadows. The low hum of the film was interrupted by a sudden scraping sound. It was coming from downstairs, faint at first, but quickly growing louder, like someone dragging furniture across the floor. It wasn't the wind. The house was still except for that noise, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I walked to the window, peering out through the blinds. The streetlights flickered in the distance, but nothing seemed out of place. I turned, my heart pounding, and quietly crept down the hallway, my footsteps muffled by the soft carpet. The living room was empty. But as I glanced toward the stairs that led to the front door, I froze. 3 figures. They were standing in the dim glow from the streetlight outside. Tall, thin shadows that didn't belong. They were too still, as if waiting for something or someone. The cold terror I'd felt in my chest when I first saw them morphed into sheer panic. I backed away from the staircase, the floor creaking under my feet. I scrambled back to my room, slamming the door behind me, locking it just as my pulse hammered in my throat. I leaned against the door, holding my breath. I tried calling my parents, but the line was dead, the phone silent in my shaking hands. And then there was a knock on the door. Not a soft tap, but a deliberate, rhythmic thud, like they knew I was inside. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice cracking. The sound on the other side didn't answer. Instead, there was a soft shuffle, the unmistakable sound of feet dragging across the hallway. I didn't want to move. I couldn't move. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps stopped. The silence was suffocating, pressing in from every direction. I could hear my own heart beating, loud and erratic in the stillness of the room. Then the door handle twisted. I didn't know who was on the other side. My entire body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. Not yet. I crouched in the corner of my closet, hidden by piles of old clothes and boxes. Footsteps echoed in the hall. They were getting closer. I could hear each one now, clear and deliberate, as though someone was taking their time. The cold sweat that pooled on the back of my neck was nothing compared to the rising panic in my chest. They knew I was here. I could feel it. I heard the door open. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle my breath, the fear building inside me like a wave, each heartbeat louder than the last. I heard the floorboards creak, heavy footsteps crossing into my room, and then a sudden, violent movement, the sound of covers being ripped off the bed. My body was shaking, and for a moment I thought I might lose control. But I stayed still. I couldn't risk making a sound. The door to my closet opened slowly, so slowly that I could barely hear it at first. The hinges squealed as the door moved, revealing the darkness beyond. I didn't dare move. I knew they were standing there. I could hear their breathing, shallow, steady, just inches from where I crouched in the dark. The air smelled like dust and the musty scent of forgotten things. But there was something else, too. Something metallic, like rust. I closed my eyes, holding my breath. The seconds stretched into hours. Then, with a sudden motion, the door to the closet was slammed shut. A figure had been standing just outside, but now they were gone. I could hear them moving quickly through the hallway, their footsteps fading away. The house was silent again. I stayed there, frozen, long after the footsteps had stopped. I didn't know what had just happened, but I was certain that something had been in my room. That much was undeniable. Finally, after what felt like hours, I cautiously opened the closet door. My room was still the same. The covers were tossed on the floor, but nothing seemed to have been taken. No one was there. I backed out of the room, my legs unsteady. The house seemed different now, like the walls were closing in. I grabbed my phone again, trying to call my parents, but there was no signal. The night had stretched on, far longer than any Halloween should, and the sense of being watched lingered long after I'd returned to my bed. I stayed up all night, waiting, listening to every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows. When my parents finally came home the next morning, I tried to explain what had happened, but their faces, confused, tired, didn't seem to register any of it. I wasn't sure if I had imagined it, or if something had truly been inside the house that night. One thing was for certain: I'd never be alone again on Halloween. The wind howled through the trees, whipping dead leaves across the driveway, and the scent of damp earth lingered thick in the air. It was Halloween night, and the neighborhood was alive with the sounds of costumed children running through the streets, their laughter dancing with the flickering jack-o'-lanterns. But in our house, nestled at the edge of a dense forest, the night felt different. The darkness outside seemed deeper, more oppressive. I was alone. My parents had gone out with friends, and I had the whole house to myself. It was supposed to be a quiet night, maybe catching up on a few movies, enjoying the peace, or what little peace there was. But there was something about this Halloween that felt off, like the night was watching me. The shadows outside the windows stretched and shifted, the trees swaying as though they were whispering secrets to one another. I stepped outside for a moment to smoke, the cold biting into my skin. The backyard stretched out before me, a dark expanse that led straight into the woods. The moon was just a sliver in the sky, casting faint light across the ground, but the trees seemed to swallow most of it, leaving only pools of blackness between their trunks. I stood there, listening to the eerie quiet that had settled over the woods. Then, faintly, I heard something. At first, it was so soft that I thought I might have imagined it. A voice, not a shout, not a call, but a whisper, so distant that it was almost drowned out by the wind. I frowned, stepping closer to the edge of the deck, straining to hear. "Hey, over here." The voice was deep, gravelly. I froze. My eyes scanned the trees. Had someone been out there? Maybe a trick-or-treater lost in the woods. The idea felt ridiculous, but something about it felt real. Too real. I shook it off, chalking it up to the strange feeling that came with being alone in the dark. But then the voice came again, louder this time, cutting through the night. "We need help. Over here." I couldn't see anyone, couldn't hear any movement. But I felt it, the presence of someone just beyond the shadows. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't right. I turned toward the house, wondering if I should go inside, but curiosity kept me rooted to the spot. Was this some prank? A voice carried by the wind, the perfect Halloween trick. "Please, help us. We're stuck." My heart skipped a beat. This was no joke. The voice was clearer now, closer, as though it had moved through the woods and was standing just at the edge of my backyard. I couldn't see anything, but the chill creeping up my spine told me everything I needed to know. Something was out there. I took a step forward, my footfall muffled by the damp ground. "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling despite myself. No response. The silence was suffocating, thick with tension. Then a rustling sound, almost imperceptible, from the direction of the trees. I turned quickly, squinting into the darkness. The voice had been so certain, so desperate. There had to be someone out there. But the woods were silent once again. The feeling of being watched intensified, as if the trees themselves were staring back at me, their gnarled branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal hands. I began walking toward the trees, my heart pounding harder with each step. "Where are you?" I called out, my voice shaking now. "What happened? Are you okay?" For a moment there was no answer, just the wind. Then a reply, a low laugh. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a voice asking for help. This wasn't a person in need. "You're closer now," the voice said, its tone dripping with something dark and menacing. "We see you." I froze, the blood draining from my face. The laughter that followed wasn't human. It was sharp, wheezing, almost animalistic. My instincts screamed at me to turn and run, to lock myself inside and forget I'd ever heard it. But instead, I stood there, frozen in place. Suddenly, something moved in the woods, something huge. It was a shadow among shadows, its form indistinct, but its presence suffocating. My chest tightened as I took a step backward, my feet stumbling over the uneven ground. The rustling grew louder, closer. It wasn't a person, that much was clear. Whatever was out there, it wasn't human. I rushed back toward the house, my heart thudding in my chest, my breaths shallow and erratic. As I reached the door, I heard the voice again, this time right behind me, as if it had followed me from the trees. "Don't go. We're not finished yet." I spun around, but the night was empty. The woods beyond my backyard were still, silent again. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had it been a hallucination, a trick of the wind? But no, I knew what I'd heard. I knew what I'd felt. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the locks. My heart wouldn't stop pounding, and the dread that had settled in my gut wouldn't fade. I checked the windows. pulling the blind shut, and sat in the dark, still and silent as the wind howled outside. But no matter how tightly I closed my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, watching, waiting. And the voice? It still echoed in my mind. As the hours passed, Halloween crept toward its end, but the unease didn't leave. It clung to me like a shadow, always just out of sight. The voice was gone, but I knew it wasn't over. Whatever was in the woods that night, it hadn't finished with me yet. Halloween night. The street outside my window glowed orange from rows of jack-o'-lanterns, their crooked grins flickering in the cold wind. Children's laughter had faded hours ago, leaving the neighborhood eerily quiet. Inside my room, the glow of string lights and a faint pumpkin spice candle were the only things keeping the darkness at bay. I'd been scrolling on my phone, trying to ignore the creaks of the old house settling around me. It was late. My parents had long since gone to bed, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The moonlight spilled through the thin curtains, casting shifting shadows across the walls. For reasons I couldn't explain, my chest felt heavy, like the room itself had taken a breath and was holding it. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to drift off, when I heard it. A sound. It wasn't loud, just a faint rustling beneath me, like fabric sliding over wood. My first thought was the cat. We didn't have a cat. My heart skipped a beat and I held my breath, listening. Silence. Then it came again. A soft scrape like fingernails dragging lightly against the underside of the mattress. I sat up slowly, my sheets bunching around me. The candle flickered once, casting a long, twisting shadow across the room. "Mom?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Nothing, just the house creaking and the faint rattle of wind at the window. The sound came again, this time clearer. A low, steady breathing. Not mine. Under the bed. I froze. My mind raced, every horror movie I'd ever seen flooding my head at once. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe I'd left my headphones under there playing something. My brain clawed for an answer, any answer, but none came. The breathing stopped. Slowly, I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet brushing the cool wooden floor. The boards creaked softly under my weight. The air smelled faintly of wax from the candle, but beneath it was something else, damp, earthy, like soil after rain. I crouched down. The shadows under the bed were thick, swallowing the weak light from the candle. My heart hammered in my ears. "Hello," I whispered. My voice trembled. At first, nothing. Just darkness. Then a face stared back at me. It was pale, impossibly pale, with wide, hollow eyes and a mouth slightly open as if mid-breath. A woman's face. Her hair hung down in tangled clumps, obscuring parts of her sunken cheeks. She was lying there, still as death, her chin just inches from the floorboards. Her eyes didn't blink. I jerked back, slamming into the nightstand. The candle toppled but didn't go out. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. The space under the bed was empty again. No, I'd seen her. I knew I had. The breathing started once more, louder this time. The sound of fingers dragging along the wood beneath me. I could feel it in my feet now, the faintest vibration through the floor. My entire body was trembling. I grabbed my phone, fumbling to turn on the flashlight. The bright beam cut through the darkness like a knife. I aimed it at the floor, hands shaking. Empty. My sheets were half pulled off the bed now, trailing onto the ground. The candlelight flickered violently. Shadows jumping like frantic dancers on the walls. The temperature in the room seemed to drop all at once, a cold so sharp it felt like needles pressing into my skin. Then a voice, soft, raspy, impossibly close. "Get out." It came from under the bed. I staggered back, my phone clattering to the floor. The light spun wildly, the beam cutting across the room in erratic arcs. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. I didn't want to look again. I couldn't. But something was moving. A hand, pale and thin with long, dirty fingernails, slid out from beneath the bed, curling against the floorboards like a spider testing its prey. The nails scraped, leaving faint lines in the wood. Another hand followed, and then slowly she began to emerge. Her hair hung like a curtain of wet weeds, her face hidden until she tilted it upward. Her eyes were blank, glassy, reflecting the candlelight in twin pinpoints. Her mouth hung open, a low hiss slipping from between her teeth. I stumbled toward the door, reaching for the handle, but it wouldn't turn. My hands slipped on the cold metal as the hiss grew louder, rising into a ragged, inhuman screech. The candle extinguished in an instant, plunging the room into darkness. I could hear her crawling now. The sound of elbows and knees dragging across the wood, closer, closer. My phone's light flickered where it lay on the floor, its beam catching glimpses of her, pale arms, twisted fingers, hair dragging behind like a shroud. "Leave," she whispered again, her voice splitting into two, then three, overlapping itself like a chorus of ghosts. "Leave." I wrenched the door open with all my strength and bolted into the hallway, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. I didn't stop running until I'd reached the front door, fumbling with the locks until I tore it open and stumbled outside into the cold October air. The street was empty. No kids, no parents, no lights, but the dying flicker of jack-o'-lanterns. I turned back to the house, chest heaving. Through my bedroom window on the second floor, I saw her. She stood at the glass, her face pressed against it, pale fingers splayed across the pane. Her eyes found mine even from that distance. And then, slowly, she sank out of sight, disappearing into the dark. I stayed outside until dawn, too afraid to go back in. When I finally did, my room looked normal. The bed was made, the candle unlit, my phone on the nightstand as if it had never fallen. Only one thing was different, faint scratches in the wood where her nails had been. Even now, years later, Halloween carries that smell of damp earth for me. And every October night when the wind shakes my windows, I swear I can hear her breathing just beneath my bed.